Hey folks, this is Best in Slot and welcome to the first of 5 videos we'll be doing throughout this week as we discuss the brand new Prehistoric Planet Season 2. I'd love to hear your opinions and thoughts down below in the comment section as well. We'll be talking about the dinosaurs of course, and non-dinosaurs especially for this first episode, the scenes, hopefully some fun scientific tidbits, and also a little bit of a focus on the camera trickery and the music choices and things like that that they use to ape modern naturalistic documentaries. It's worth mentioning that this time around the Uncovered series, that was a bonus on Apple TV, wherein they dig into the scientific concepts behind one of the ideas presented in the show. It used to be a bonus, it's now integrated directly into the episode. This is good, it means lots more people are going to see it and see that science presented, but it also unfortunately means the episodes are quite a lot shorter. This one clocks in at 34 minutes, making it 5 minutes shorter than the shortest episode from Season 1. I won't be talking about these uncovered segments separately, we'll be talking about them as we go through the episode at the relevant parts. But let's get started with Islands then, our very first episode, very exciting. Attenborough introduces us and it takes no time at all for the beloved Carnotaurus to make an appearance as we zip through some Season 1 clips and a Season 2 preview. The episode starts for real in southern Europe, Romania and Harteg Island 66 million years ago. I'm really hoping that'll drill into the head of the wider populace over time. We are once again, of course, at the end of the Cretaceous at the Maastrichtian. We get a little bit of an introduction with this little pterosaur rafting along on some loose vegetation. Some nice little camera tricks here, we're going to see this kind of thing a lot, but utilising depth of field to really emphasise the feeling that these are real animals and this is real camera shots and nothing here is CGI. Of course it is, but just throwing in these camera effects that you'd have in a normal nature documentary really does push that feeling that this is real life. It's very, very effective. We see this little pterosaur floating by and then we see this mosasaur hunting beneath the waves. It's worth noting that neither the pterosaur nor the mosasaur are named in terms of their species. This was a big problem I had with Season 1 and I was a little disappointed that it happened instantly in Season 2, but it is worth noting right now that this does not happen again throughout the entire episode and every single other creature that we see will be given a genus name. Anyways, the focus isn't on the pterosaur, it's on the returning Zalmoxis, which is also stranded on this loose piece of vegetation. And we get these fantastic shots, so it's very much like Jaws. You know, the Zalmoxis knows it needs to get out of the water, so we see this dorsal fin cut through the waves, approaching the Zalmoxis, which hurls itself into the water, and then scrambles up onto a much larger piece of vegetation where it meets a friend. It meets another Zalmoxis and they form a little mini couple in a rather cute little scene. And Attenborough's talking about how these are rafting along and how they're going to discover new islands, they're going to wash up there and maybe they'll establish a population. Now this is called very literally a rafting event, otherwise known as oceanic dispersal. And this is one way that island masses can acquire new species, oftentimes mammals. For example, Madagascar acquired the primates that live there now as they travelled to the island via raft and then bred and evolved from there. It's not just mammals though, birds, reptiles, even spiders have reached new locations via rafting events. I believe this was first observed not that long ago, back in 1995, where this gigantic group of iguanas was travelling along some wreckage and they ended up settling a new population that's still there to this day. Anyways, this is quite a short introductory scene, but just nice to see Zalmoxis again. Always in trouble, always in a little danger, but this time going to make a new home and hopefully start a brand new family. From there we move on to southern Europe and Italy. Now Europe at this point is primarily islands as well, we're going to spend a lot of time there, and Tephishadros is introduced, a hadrosauroid from Trieste in Italy. There's some really interesting details here. Of course the beak is absolutely bizarre with its splayed out ridge sort of manner helping it cut down that foliage, and then we get to see the adorable baby. The babies will be a big focus of my videos, it's just the way it is because oh my god, my heart breaks every single time. I do want to mention again a little bit of camera work there, just having that blurry foliage in the foreground and the background, bringing the Tephishadros into focus like that, again emphasizes the feeling that these are real dinosaurs. Now Tephishadros is quite a small hadrosaurid, it's about the size of a human. Smaller than its mainland cousins, and this was posited for a long time to be a case of insular dwarfism. Now this is where typically larger animals evolve or grow to be smaller in size because they're contained in a smaller environment, there's less resources around, like in the islands of Europe at this time. Funnily enough, the inverse is also true, and there's something called island gigantism where typically smaller animals, like say small rodents, grow to be much larger on an island environment. It's worth noting that a 2021 paper by Chiarenza et al. Suggests that Tephi was small, but well within range for Eurasian hadrosauroids at the time. So it could just be a smallish hadrosaurid. It's not necessarily an example of insular dwarfism, which is very much a thing still. Anyways, Attenborough mentions there should be no predators in the area, and the framing here is, and we're going to talk about this a lot in this video, it's very, very horror film. There's this ominous hum rising up in the background, and the shot keeps cutting to this spider weaving its web between these strands, and that is a very typical horror film move there. And it doesn't just cut to it once, it cuts to it twice, as though the spider is this ominous omen of what's to come. It's very, very effective, it must be said. You know, these little islands do not have resident predators, but of course that does not mean they can't be found by predators. And the wind starts to rustle, this ominous tone builds and builds, and we get this slow zoom in, and then this harsh stinging tone, and these pterosaurs appear in the distance. These Hatzegopteryx, framed as ferocious predators, land down upon the island. They're bounding around terrestrially, they're making these guttural calls and these almost roaring, screaming-esque noises as they hunt the small Tephi. It's also worth noting the design of the Hatzegopteryx here is, I think, probably purposefully quite ominous and spooky. They're very dark in coloration, generally speaking, but that's clashed with the red crest, and the crest itself with that ridging and that sort of pinkish to red to white coloration, to me really resembles like an exposed organ. I'm not sure how much that's on purpose, but it definitely has that looks like an organ to me, it really does. And I think that really emphasizes, again, that sort of brutalistic nature of what we're observing here. The Hatzegopteryx is, of course, another returning creature, and again, it looks fantastic here. The levels of detail on the beak are phenomenal. I love the furry, feathered coating. It's just a beautiful looking rendition of the animal. The pterosaurs in general are always superb in this series. Adam was talking here about how the Tephi should remain perfectly still, and we get this fantastic shot. And again, this is a really cool way that Prehistoric Planet can play with that nature documentary format. We get a shot from the perspective of the baby Tephi that's hiding in the undergrowth, looking up at this ominous, looming presence as it's hunting it. And of course, that's not something you could really achieve in real life, but you can do it here, and it still feels like a nature documentary. But there's a little bit more creativity injected in there. Anyways, Attenborough mentions that the Tephi should remain perfectly still and not run, so of course, one goes for a runner, gets caught, gets snapped up within the beak. That will become relevant later on. This scene is the scene that's really talked about during the Uncovered at the end of the episode. And Mark Whitten and Daranesh, God, I really think I'm butchering that, come on to talk about why we believe adstarchids like Hatzegopteryx were terrestrial hunters, saying that whilst they are well built for flight, something that was still debated fairly recently, it's more long voyages and not the twisty, turny, rapid movements that would be required to catch other airborne creatures. They mention how it's not really built for skim feeding either, therefore it must be a terrestrial hunter. That's where it's going to get its food. It's worth noting Mark Whitten presents really well, to be fair to him. They go on to say that a huge pterosaur track that was found was made by an adstarchid, the largest pterosaur track ever discovered, showcasing their ability to walk upright and well. It's also worth giving a little credit. I found the Uncovered to be really well made this time around. The scientific diagrams and the graphical additions were really, really effective. The Uncovered is fantastic. I still wish it was like a bonus thing rather than taking up episode time, but you know, it is what it is. Next, we move to Madagascar and Cymosuchus, my beloved. You're going to see a lot of screenshots of the Cymosuchus, the pug-nosed crocodilomorph. The CGI here is the most impressive so far in the video for me. You can see the way the light is catching just a little bit on the ridges of that Cymosuchus on the right-hand side. It's very, very effective, very, very realistic. The way they're kind of hidden a little bit behind the evening light, it's very, very, very effective. They really do feel real. They're adorable to boot, and they move and act a little bit like dogs as well, as you'll see in this scene here. The way they sort of clamber above each other, clamber all over each other, and how they act in general is a little bit like some excited puppies. It's a fascinating creature in general, having this terrestrial crocodilomorph. A lot of crocodilomorphs at the time were of course terrestrial as well, but Cymosuchus is also vegetarian. They've got teeth shaped like maple leaves, and it makes it very effective for consuming vegetation, which is why we believe they are vegetarian. And just look at it. These are tough creatures, well designed to survive predation. You know, they've got that hardy, tough, rugged skin all along their back. But just look at my heart, my absolute heart. This is my favourite shot in the entire episode because it's just a sleepy dude. This is an innocent man that's living his best life. Again, has that sort of dog-like, puppy-like sort of quality. But of course, that hardy exterior might not be enough to save them. Majungasaurus makes an appearance, the apex predator of Madagascar, and a belosaurid that thrived only at the very end of the Cretaceous. At the end of the Maastrichtian, Majungasaurus was only around for a few million years. This one looks absolutely fantastic. It looks a lot browner here than it is when we see it in more zoomed out shots. There's more doses of red in there as well, the coloration. But I love it's got this bony plate, which we know was there, and it probably was there to support some keratinous structures of some description, like, for example, this large singular horn that this Majunga has in the middle of its head. A big, chunky beast, like huge lips, huge mouth, just a force of nature, it feels like. And you see it from a distance here. It's just a chunk. I don't know how else to say it. It's this big blob of muscle and meat and ferociousness, and it's spying these playful little Cymosuchus from a distance. Anyways, Majungasaurus is stalking the Cymosuchus. This one, as it happens, is blind in its left eye as well, which is an interesting little detail. You can see these claw marks dropping down the eye, and obviously that's not going to help her as a hunter. Attenborough mentions she's hungry, she's desperate, she's not been successful lately, and I'm sure that isn't helping. Very curious what has caused this damage. It doesn't mention it in the show, what has caused this damage to her, but anyways, the hunt begins. We get this really cool shot. It's like a trail cam footage, you would see. It's like the camera is static and the Cymosuchus sort of curves around the foliage and runs off into the distance. Again, just something you would typically see in a nature documentary. And then we have this really entertaining scene that plays a little bit like it's seen from like Looney Tunes or something like that. The Majungasaurus chasing down these Cymosuchus, and it says that Cymosuchus would have burrowed itself into these burrows, exposing just its sort of hardy back, and that way it wouldn't be able to be fed on. And this one Cymosuchus is being chased around from hole to hole to hole and can't find itself a hole to hide in. Shut up, no jokes. The little guy realizes he's got nowhere to hide, so, the baller that he is, he turns around and he fights, and this little Cymosuchus is slapping his tail on the ground and doing little charges, calling out and just trying to scare away this gigantic, comparatively, Majungasaurus. And it works. The Majungasaurus doesn't seem to know what to do. She's a little bit scared, she's a little bit tentative, and eventually the Cymosuchus takes the opportunity to dart into the ground and hides, and the Majungasaurus tries to nestle its way in there but can't quite grasp its meal. Again, it's a very entertaining scene, but again, I want to point out as well, we talked about this, I think, in our preview, but if you look at the Majungasaurus here, you can see it's got these osteoderms all over the body, these larger bits of bone, and in season 1 with the Carnotaurus, these were symmetrical and very even along the body, and then evidence came out suggesting Belosaurids probably had much more random distribution for these osteoderms, and now that's been integrated into our season 2 Majungasaurus. For the next scene, we're remaining on Madagascar and the introduction of the mammals and the Adalatherium. Only 2 feet long, but still one of the largest mammals around at this point in time. This is the dawn of the mammals after all. Adala was only described actually in 2020, and it really became a touchstone, or will become a touchstone for the future as well, for future mammalian depictions. If Prehistoric Planet was made just a couple of years earlier, this probably wouldn't have been possible. This is really a very new, and probably the newest piece of information we could possibly have for a show produced for 2023. This female Adalatherium is on the hunt, and she discovers a clutch of eggs. It's building up to her as hunter, and she's discovered a prize meal, and it turns out they're her eggs, subverting your expectations a little bit there. So she's an egg-laying mammal, just like you'd find in, say, modern monotremes like the echidna and the platypus. Eventually, these little eggs hatch, and these little dudes pop out and begin to suckle on their mother. And I don't think these are CGI. I think these are very clearly not CGI. They're just, the CGI in the show is fantastic, but it's not quite this level. CGI in general is not quite this level quite yet. I think these are baby mice of some description, or baby rats or something like that. And I think what they've done is build like a fake furry body essentially and attach some milk producing nipples to it basically, so that these little newly hatched babies, well, newly born babies in this case, they wouldn't have actually been hatched, would go and then suckle on the Adalatherium. But it's a very effective thing. It works really, really well, and I'm glad they're still integrating real world animals, and we'll see it a couple of times again as well. But integrating real world animals, especially with mammals, this makes more sense as well, because they've got such a direct, the difference between the Adalatherium baby and a modern, say, baby rat or something is probably not that large, whereas with dinosaurs it's much more up in the air. 2 months later, they are big and furry and heartbreakingly adorable like everything else in this bloody show, all squeaks and chirps. The mother has to leave to hunt, and we see other creatures at night using this night vision, including the Majungasaurus, and again, it's fantastic camera work, and what I really like here, and we're going to see a few camera tricks like this during the video, you can see the glow around the Majungasaurus, which just pushes it a little further into that realm of realism, that sort of soft glow emanating out of creatures that you tend to see in night vision footage. Now, initially on this next shot, so the Adalatherium is out hunting, she's trying to gather food, she's rooting around in the ground for roots and nuts and stuff like that. And I mentioned in my notes that this CGI here is incredible, but I think it's actually a real life animal. I think it might be a skunk or something of that description. I'm pretty sure it's a real animal because, again, it was just a step too realistic. You know, just a little bit beyond the bounds of our power at the moment, but again, I love that integration of real world animals, and the fact that I believed it means it's very effective, and I think the wider populace will absolutely be just, yeah, that looks great, you know, maybe they've found an Adalatherium somewhere somehow. Unfortunately though, because she's off hunting and trying to gather food so she can produce more milk, unfortunately this means the offspring have been left alone and thus are vulnerable, and thus heralds the return from season 1 of the Mashikasaurus. Now I tend to say Masiakasaurus, but Attenborough says Mashikasaurus. I'm going to trust in Attenborough, I'm going to roll with it for this. And Mashikasaurus begins to hunt by prodding into burrows with its long neck, and it's got this sleek head. It makes it very well placed to nestle into burrows. You can see the head is really just not that much wider than the neck in the slightest. And just before we move on, this is the other shot I was talking about that I want to give a shout out to. One of the criticisms I saw fairly recently actually for season 1 was that there was a sense of scale missing from quite a lot of the shots. It didn't show the relative size of the dinosaurs all that well. But shots like this give you a very real impression of the size of the Mashikasaurus, and it's very useful, and it's something I'd like to see done more and more throughout the show. Anyways, it's building up to the Mashika finding the Adala, and then whomp! This gigantic snake reaches out from the undergrowth, grabs the dino within its jaws, and then circles its body around it. This is predated, this event, by Attenborough saying, "Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted." He doesn't say it like that, that'd be very weird. And I wish that had been left out because it kind of spoils the moment a little bit. I wish they'd held back on that, but it's still a really fantastic scene, again subverts your expectations. The snake moves so fast, and within a mere split second, it's coiling around Mashika, and you can hear the body being suffocated, squeezed, you can hear the crunch of bones. This snake is Matsoya, a genus of snakes found in Brazil, Argentina, India, and here in Madagascar, named appropriately Matsoya madagascariensis. Again, I'm really appreciating the increased focus we've had on season 1 already on non-dinosaurs. Anyways, night falls, the Matsoya sleeps, and the Adalatherium leaves the area because there's a big ass snake outside. It's time to go, you know. Next we go to the far south to the Antarctic Peninsula, and our introduction to the Imperobata comes courtesy of an infrared camera. Worth noting again, Attenborough pronounces Imperobata Improbata, I think it is, but I can't change everything at once, okay, one at a time. Attenborough even says how a thermal camera reveals a huddle of glowing bodies. It's commitment to the bit. These are fantastically produced shots, and I love the little emphasis as well here on the fact that dinosaurs were warm-blooded. It's obvious to us, of course, but it's probably not really embedded in the wider cultural consciousness quite yet entirely, I wouldn't say. And it's just another camera trick that makes these animals feel real. It's the kind of thing you'd see in a nature documentary, and it's just done straight. There's no, you know, oh, we rendered it like this for the purposes of the show or anything like that. These are real. You're viewing them through a real thermal camera. They've got a FLIR out, you know, and this is what we ended up with. Again, I love that. I think it's fantastic. They clamber up and they head out into the Antarctic Peninsula, and we meet their prey. They're heading out to hunt, and they're hunting Morosaurus. This is an ornithopod member of Elasmaria, which is a clade that contains many dinosaurs that you may have heard once described, and I actually did not realize this was considered defunct or a little bit dubious these days, but you'd call them Hypsilophodonts, and I would often say Hypsilophodonts, so that's good to know for me. But Elasmaria contains a lot of those same dinosaurs that were once regarded as Hypsilophodonts. Some nice little details here on the Morosaurus as well. Not too dissimilar. It's got like a very small version of what the Tephichadros had, with that little bit of indenting and ribbing on the beak there to help it with vegetation. And it is fully feathered, which is quite a new thing for dinosaurs of this type. It is a little bit of a more recent leap. and it looks really effective actually. I think it's a beautiful looking dinosaur. It looks appropriate for the environment, those sort of soft browns, slight greyish colours, helping it blend in with that tundra environment. It's hunted by the Imperobata, which has the exact same sort of rough colour scheme. You can see it there behind that snow-covered branches. It blends in really nicely. Again, very effective shots showcasing its ability as a sneaky, silent hunter. And the chase sequence takes place. They run out onto a frozen lake, and unfortunately for the Imperobata, one of them slips down and the hunt ends with success for the Morosaurus getting away safely. Imperobata is interesting. A lot of people are going to look at this and probably see a Dromaeosaurid. They're going to see something akin to Velociraptor or Deinonychus, etc. But it's just a Paravian theropod, and the main way you can really see the difference here is it just lacks that giant sickle claw on the feet. It's still a very capable, large hunter, very well designed for this environment, even if unsuccessful this time, but it is not a Dromaeosaurid, as I think a lot of people in the wider public will see this and think, raptor. Finally, we return to Europe and the Hatzegopteryx. He gently places down the Tephishadros carcass from a little bit earlier in the show, draws lines in the sand and gathers driftwood to build a prospective mating display. The music here is beautiful and soft, occasionally with this growing, vivid drumbeat in the background, building up to what he's about to attempt. I do find it all a little hilarious because it is no doubt a absolutely beautiful moment, and then there's this Tephishadros juvenile carcass just lying in the middle of all of it, which kind of subverts the emotion a little bit, but it's still a very nice scene. Eventually the female arrives and they begin their mating dance, and he's lifting his head up and showcasing the carcass and just trying to entice her in general. We've talked about this, of course, in the previews, but it is worth noting the Hatzegopteryx, the male here in particular, is absolutely beautiful. That crest design, the coloration, the elaboration on the patterning is just absolutely stunning. You can see the ridging all the way along like we saw earlier in those more organ-coloured ones, but the explosiveness of colour and the sort of eye-shaped pattern that you'd see in a lot of modern birds as well is just really evocative, really beautiful. Again, I love the feathery coating they've got. They are, I think, my favourite design in the video, it must be said. Oh no, Saimasuka's. Second favourite design in the video probably goes to the Hatzegopteryx. I think they are beautiful. Oh, Imperobata though. Now obviously this entire scene, this sort of mating dance is all very speculative, but given the elaborate mating displays we see in modern animals, birds in particular, it's not really even slightly outside the realms of possibility. Anyways, the music is swelling, they're dancing together, it's a beautiful moment, then another male approaches, this one with the organ crest, as it shall now be known. He's much younger, and I wonder if that's the reason for the different pigmentation, is maybe it's something that develops with age, or if it's simply a difference in genetics. Much the same way that you see modern birds have vastly different colours on their feathers, even amongst the same species. It could just be a localization sort of thing. You know, Hatzegopteryx from this area have this coloration, Hatzegopteryx from this area have this coloration. Something like that. The two battle across the beach for mating rights with the female, with the older, beautifully coloured male emerging victorious. It's really cool to see them battle like this though. It's very awkward a little bit, you know, they're obviously well built for terrestrial movement, but it still feels very strange with those elongated limbs and those huge necks, and they're snapping at each other and biting at each other, and the older male grabs hold of the younger male as he tries to flee. It's a nice little moment. It only lasts a few seconds. I think the younger male realizes quite quickly that he's maybe not built for this. Not quite yet. The female's disappeared, but she returns, the male stands up triumphantly, and there's a lovely moment of animation here which I really appreciated. You can see the male here in the bottom right, standing up, raising his wings to the skies, like triumphant, yes, I defeated him for you, look how sexy I am. And then he returns to all four limbs, and the way he falls down to the ground is just really nicely animated. It's got a lot of momentum and weight to it. If you imagine yourself standing up on one leg or on tiptoes or something, or just, you know, a little bit out of balance, something you can only hold for a short amount of time, the way you come back to Earth is noticeable. It's always very quick, and gravity's kind of getting cold and you're going, right, get back down here. And the Hatzegopteryx is animated in that exact way, that you can really feel that same sense of motion. It's a very small detail, but it just shows the level of attention, of care and love put into even the most common animations that these creatures will do. Anyway, she's clearly impressed, so they begin to mate. Attenborough says it's all over in just a few seconds, which feels like a pretty unnecessary drive-by to me. But I really enjoyed the detail here as well, the male Hatzegopteryx biting down on the upper neck of the female for kind of grip and to hold her in place. Again, something we see quite a lot in modern animals. And that's the end of Islands. It was a really good introduction to season 2. I do have a couple of quibbles, which we'll talk about in a second, but I liked it a lot as an introduction. I love the focus on non-dinosaur creatures. That was really good. You know, seeing the Simosuchus, seeing the Hatzegopteryx, seeing the Matsuya was a huge surprise to me personally. I thought that was really cool. I was very, very happy to see that. And of course, it is a shame the episode was so short. It wasn't a huge problem, but there were a couple of scenes. Like, for example, in the Hatzegopteryx scene, it mentions how the female's not there, the male seems sad, and then she returns. And that could have been an effective moment, but it lasts about 4 seconds. It lasts about as long as the sex scene does, you know, and then the female is back again. The moment didn't really get any time to breathe because the episode is so short and they had to fit everything in. I would have loved to see 5 more minutes, not even a new scene, but 5 more minutes on the existing scenes just to let them breathe a little bit more. I'd give it probably an 8 out of 10. Really, really good start. Anyways, we'll be back tomorrow with the Badlands. Very excited to go to India in particular, see the Icysaurus and the Rajasaurus, but there's a lot of exciting dinosaurs to come, I'm sure. Until then, thank you very much for joining me. Throw me a like down below if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what your favourite part of the Islands episode was. Remember, you can watch this for yourself on Apple TV. You could even just go make a free trial and sign up for the week. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Cheers, much love as always. Bye-bye.